Hartlike goeie dag en welkom by nog 'n uitsending van Agri Monitor namens my Ronel Rademeier en my kollega Elvira Hatting wat vir julle altyd landbou nuus bring. Nou ja, in vandag se episode kyk ons na twee insetsels wat Elvira vir ons voorberei het nadat sy die afgelope naweek die Schneider-familie, dis nou die bekende meneer Mecki Schneider en sy familie se Okabra Boeredag daar op hulle plaas Okamutombe, naby Grootfontein bygewoon het. Die een insetsel handel oor Dr. Beffa. Hy is hoof van die Nasionale Kudde in Zimbabwe en hy gesels bietjie oor hoe jy koeie se grootte by hulle omgewing kan laat inpas, terwyl sy met Mecki Schneider gesels het oor vrugbaarheid in kuddes en hoe dit verbeter kan word. Dit was dan 'n lesing wat hy daar aangebied het. 'n Heerlike kuierdag op Okamutombe met die Okabra Boeredag. Bly dan ingeskakel daarvoor.
Funding part of it and the risk aspects that are related to the potato production is also
I also want to commend the Schneider family for holding field days. We in Zimbabwe are starting to get back into holding field days. I also want to commend the Schneider family for choosing fertility and being the main topic of the day. Pregnancy or fertility is 4 times more important than any other production trait. And that brings 2 questions to me. How many times when we are evaluating our animals are we paying 4 times the attention to fertility than we are onto the next trait? And to touch on what Mecki was just saying just now, when we are selecting a bull, are we spending 4 times the attention on the fertility of his daughters, or what we anticipate the fertility of these daughters are? The long-term selection and genotype environment interaction study at Metopa's Research Institute, I analyzed data over 40 years. It's one of the world's longest selection trials, and it was one of the world's first G/E studies in cattle. The conclusive results in mice came out in 1952, and the scientists at Metopa said, what about looking at cattle? So hats off to them. It's a big experiment, a lot of money, and this is what they did. They started in 1957. We selected animals in 2 environments for 20 years, and then 1976 to 1995, we crossed over. We started with 200 very good Afrikaner cattle, which was the mainstay of production in Zimbabwe at that point in time. And we split them into 2 groups of 100 cows each. And this group here is what was the traditional veld management practices. Cattle were only given veld, no supplementation, and mated to calve late relative to the rains, December to February. So your mating season would have been February to May. The other group were now, so the science at that time was saying if you supplemented, your cows were coming out of the dry season in a better condition. You can calve before the rains, October to December, so that the calf has the full benefit of the grazing season, and our mating is December to February. So these are the 2 environments. There's two things going on, feeding and time of mating. Selection was for weight. Weight of weaners weight of bulls at weaning, and weight of heifers at replacement. So emphasis, single trait selection for weight. And then in 1976 we increased the number of cows in each line to 150, and we initiated what we call the crossover. So 75 cows remained in their environment. So this is now what I'm calling the non-supplemented genotype, or non-supplemented late calving in the non-supplemented environment. And we took 75 cows, non-supplemented line, now being reared in the supplemented environment. And the same thing, 75 controls, supplemented environment, supplemented genotype, 75 animals from the supplemented environment, genotype now being reared in the non-supplemented environment. So I'm looking at calving success, presence or absence of a calf. The supplemented line is only 10 kgs heavier, and the fertility crashed. What we think happened is that selection for weight was effective in increasing cow size, and when we take these bigger cows and put them into the poorer environment, they cannot maintain that 20 kg difference. There's only 10. So we're talking 10 kgs, half a body condition score, even less. But we think it was at that critical phase which caused the ovarian function to shut down and caused the crash. Okay. So the message there is you need to be really careful that your cow size is matched with your environment, and if not, you need to feed to have that body condition score to get that fertility. So the other study I want to look at is also a unique study, one of the unique studies in the world, and it was a massive breed evaluation study conducted at Matopus, 74 to 1990, and what came out of this study was the productivity of indigenous breeds. And I'm looking at maternal productivity. And I've got my purebreds. I'm looking firstly at the purebreds, Mashona, Nkoni, Thuli, Brahman, Charolais, Afrikaner, Sussex. And across here I've got the cow weight at weaning, calving rate, calf mortality, 18-month weight. Now remember, that's 18-month weight of calves from these 7 purebreds mated to 7 terminal size, so they're crossbred calves. And the key here was the productivity, what we are calling productivity, and that is weight of calf at 18 months per unit weight of cow mated, your factory. And you will see, and I've ranked them according to productivity. And what you can see is that the smaller cow tended to be the most productive. So if we look at the Mashona, the smallest cow by a long way, 130 kgs lighter than your Sussex. It had the highest calving rate along with some of the other Sanger breeds. Lowest calf mortality. Obviously the Mashona had a light calf. You can see very little difference here apart from anything with Brahman. What we found, even 25% Brahman, 10% advantage in weight. And then we looked at productivity. And you can see productivity is inversely related to cow size. So I don't think this is so much as a breed effect per se, but what we are seeing is the smaller cow is more fertile because she can maintain her body condition in those environments and she can rebreed. This brings me to a subject that I think we don't really understand. We say our animals are adapted. What do we mean by adapted? There's so much more to adaptation, but I personally believe one of the biggest things of adaptation is body size. And what we do know is your large framed animals not adapted to stressful environments. So that's all well and good, but why are we seeing the cow sizes going big? And the big thing is market. The market, and I mean you guys are here being pushed to produce these larger, younger carcasses to get your export cuts, to get your premium cuts, to export. So it's a tough game. The meat processors, meat co, wants a bigger carcass. The bigger carcass comes from a bigger frame-sized cow. The bigger frame-sized cow is dependent on your natural grazing. And Mecki gave a very, very good introduction. Especially here, you have extreme environment fluctuations year to year. So it's tough. And you know, it's all well and good. All the slaughter stock, your weaners are going straight into the feedlot and then grain-fed finished. But your factory is on the natural resources. The point I'm trying to make is when you're maintaining your beef herd, half of the resources is going to maintaining that factory. And you need to make sure that factory is getting what it needs to give you your calves. We need to match the cow's physiological requirements to the available resources. And this is where the problem comes in, is your dry season support. And I believe this is one of our biggest problems in the subtropics. We have a situation where the cows survive the dry season. Okay? But they survive and lose body condition. We are not in the business of survival. We're in the business of production.
What is a good cow? That is the question I would like to pose for you. And the textbook will say, must calve every year, must raise a calf to a good weaning weight, and then maybe finishes. But we do consider a good cow with a grazing index. That's a summary of all the breeding values. We look at the days to calving. We look at the intercalf period or the old measure. Last 2 or 3 years, from our genetic trends, we think the growth is about average, so that's good. But we focus on fertility, on the lip and lump fat, because we think these are the earlier maturing animals, and they will have a better body condition score, and they are more marketable from the field as slaughter cattle. And the last one is feed efficiency. At the net feed indexation, which we put up at the Hofveld with Amy Fisher from the Okabra and Okabra symbols, about 500 have gone through those test stations, so we've got very strong data on feed efficiency, and that is where we focus. I can have double as efficient an animal, I could keep twice as many animals in a drought. Main components contributing to fertility are two things: it's environment and the genetics. These two things have to be in sync, and the environment does play a very important role, but there is also the genetics part, and the genetics part means that you have to do a lot of weighing, a lot of measurements, a lot of recording, a lot of data crunching, just to put it in perspective. We're talking about today on fertility, but we can't treat it properly, but this is the profitability. It's dependent on the animal. Twice as important is the animal performance, 4 times important is the fertility, but then, ladies and gentlemen, the big contributing factor to profitability is your stocking rate, which you can maintain. So let's just keep that in perspective. It has a market influence of a very drastic influence on the profitability of the business, because you want to have as many calves from your cow herd as possible in a 1-year period. That is where we make our profit. I want to emphasize this. The next bull is the one which makes your decision on fertility. All traits which we measure and which we do, you'll have a much bigger improvement if you focus on the bulls and not so much on the females. Also the females, but the bull has got a much more drastic influence. We here at Okamutombe, we focus on the sires. We do eliminate cows. Eliminating one cow is not a big factor. If you must make sure that you do that you look at the sires and the genetic potential and the fertility. Don't single trait select. That is one important thing. You can just focus on fertility today, do nothing else, and you will also not be as successful as you could be. So the message is don't single trait select. Have a balanced approach on animal breeding. You've got the most erratic rainfall, maybe not the least, but definitely the most erratic rainfall pattern from one year to the other. That makes livestock production in Namibia extremely challenging, and we as farmers are tending to react too slow for various reasons. We also, because the cattle cycle is a long cycle of 2-3 years from conception to birth to weaners to ox production, so we are not as agile as we should be. This is our rainfall pattern in the last 96 years here on this farm. That is the mean, no, that is the average. The blue ones are the rainfall parts which are above average, the red ones are below average, and what you immediately see is that you get these bursts of better years and worse years, or not so good years, but below average. And we have to cope with that. This is difficult, ladies and gentlemen. This is difficult to operate in because you don't know what the next year is and what it maintains. I want to keep it very basic. If you want to start fertility in the female herd, you start with the breeding season, full stop. It could be 1 season or 2 seasons, but that's the basis to start off with. And it's a very powerful tool to improve fertility. You adjust the breeding season according to your production cycle. I will show you just now, but in our case we do it where we think we are about 6 to 8 weeks before there's adequate available summer grazing, green grazing for the summer part. Now the advantages are of a breeding season, that the cows can maintain the condition, that the peak production of the cow and the calf coincide with your best grazing, and that you are in contemporary groups and you can do the dehorning, the marking, the weighing. You can all do as a bunch because you have contemporary groups. The concept of a contemporary group is a very important one in breeding, and then and you can select better for fertility if you are in a breeding season and can compare the contemporary group of cows to each other. Just carry on with the management principles for the female breed. We've got 2 breeding seasons here. The one is the summer, the one is the winter. That is from January to April, 90 days. We can shorten this, but at the moment, due to the decade which we come out with a drought, that's what we have at the moment. And we've got a winter breeding season from mid-June to mid-September, and those cows we wean in February, and those cows in summer we wean in August, roughly. If you've got enough fodder and enough grazing, you can have a 6th breeding season. It depends on your management, but for us, this is an important concept because we can have half the amount of bulls because we can use them use them in summer and winter, and the bulls don't stand idle for 9 months of the year, so it's a very convenient way of saving in your bull expenses. The pregnancy tests, we do twice a year or more. We do it in-house, and when we struggle, we get our vet. The summer breeding season, we do the pregnancy test in June. That is when we also do the first weighing of 200-day weight. The first weighing, we record the body condition score, very important. I mentioned that just now. And weaning in August, and we have also started now to do the body condition score with the cow calves. With the cow calves, she comes in and she calves, and within 2 weeks or 1 week, 2 weeks, one week may be too short, but 2 weeks we warn them and we give her a body condition score, because that will determine how quickly she gets into the cycling again. And we also do a good assessment of her udder. All heifers which are not in calf are sold, all of them. We just keep those that are pregnant. This year, as an example, the heifer calving rate was set 92%. For the Zimbabwe, it was 100%. And 86% of that conceived in the first 6 weeks, according to our vet, which you will check. And those heifers which we retained, the 90%, 90% of those conceived in the first 6 weeks. There were 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 which did conceive a week or 40 days later, but we focus on those heifers which conceive first and which are cycling first, because that would be the more fertile ones. Focus on the body condition score of your cows. If you go to the cattle post, that is what your eye should look at. And the second thing you should look at if you come to the cattle post is the dung of those animals, if it's in a favorable or good state for metabolism. We do a lot of data for the linkages. We rotate the cow herds. We rotate the size of the cow herds, and we rotate cows to get better linkages, and we do a lot of artificial insemination also to get the linkages of the outside. And we try to select the earlier maturing cows, and Sonia will just demonstrate that with a breeding value which is called days to calving. And we identify fertile cow lines, do a lot of artificial insemination to get in new genetics. We also can't import bulls the last 5 years from South Africa anymore. So this is the only way to get in new genetics and to make sure that your linkages are maintained, because that's very important.
Nou ja, nou is dit tyd, soos die gebruik is, om 'n draai te gaan maak by die veilings en te sien watter veilings julle in die komende week kan bywoon. Dit is nou van môre af die 1 Junie tot volgende Dinsdag, die 7de Junie, wanneer ons weer 'n uitsending het. Ons kyk ook 'n bietjie na belangrike gebeure aan die landboufront wat julle kan bywoon in ons landboudagboek, en natuurlik ook die vleispryse. Goed, wat die veilings betref, op die 1 Junie bied Hoogveld Agri hulle veiling, maandelikse veiling daar by Hoogveld aan. Namboer het in Windhoek 'n veiling, dis die Oanoptelers se stoetvee veiling wat hier gehou word, en Agra het op Grootfontein sowel as by Koeie veilings. Op die 2 Junie het WLA in Windhoek 'n grootvee veiling, Blouberg by Otjiwarongo, NLA by Bloemvelde, en Agra het by Helmeringhausen 'n veiling, sowel as die Northern Select teelers se veiling hier in Windhoek. Dan op die 3 Junie het Agra by Gobabis en Kamenjap veilings, en op die 7de Junie het NLA by die plaas Witboys vlei, en Agra het op Okakra en op Rehoboth veilinge. Wat ons dagboek betref, môre op die 1 Junie, hou Westelike Kommas Boerevereniging 'n ledevergadering. Dit begin om 3:00 in die Harmonie Boereverenigingssaal en julle kan by Amanda Greef aanmeld of by Thomas Hoorn. Daar word hulle kontakbesonderhede gegee. Op die 11de Junie hou die Bosveldstreek Bees en Daba of vind dit dan plaas en dit begin om 9:00 die oggend op die plaas Okamutombe, 20 km noord van Hoogveld en dit is aan die C30 geleë. Die tema is verhoogde opbrengs uit beesboerdery. Hella Kutse is die persoon wat julle kan kontak in verband met enige navraag en besprekings kan aanlyn gedoen word by webtickets.com.na. Dan wat die vleispryse betref, verlede week die 23ste Mei se pryse, abattoirs, meatcow en beefcore se pryse kan julle daar sien oor die verskillende grade A, B, B as ook die C grade. Wat meatcow betref, is dit dan, hang dit af van die tipe verslachtings, of dit kontrak is of hoe dit of wat die omstandighede is waaronder die beeste gelewer is. Wat veilings betref, tollies gemiddeld behaal van $34.26 per kilogram verse, $30.78, stooros $28.24, stoorverse $29.62, slagosse $28.81, slagverse $28.13, koeie, afhangend van hoe vet of maar hulle is, 'n prys het gewissel van $22.16 tot $28.54, slagbulle, veilings gemiddeld van $25.19 per kilogram, slagskape, kan julle daar sien, dorpers en vetsterte, onderskeidelik $33.46 en $33.72. Bokke het verkoop vir $1.356 Namibiese dollar stuk en koeie met kalvers vir $13.796 Namibiese dollar. Dit bring ons dan aan die einde van vandag se program. Ek wens vir julle almal 'n baie geseënde week toe, waar ons vandag al leer aan die einde van Mei maand staan en die winter môre amptelik begin. Nou ja, ek weet nie daar by julle nie, maar hier in Windhoek is dit sommer goed koud en dit gaan later in die week nog kouer word. Warm bly, tot volgende week, totsiens.